fundamentally, we believe that Western powers should not use military contractors in combat, okay? What we mean by this, like, like, simply to give like a brief model, like we'll decommission all contracts we have with these people and like not create any new ones, fairly like self-explanatory, okay? We believe that there is something like inherently wrong with like a war for profit, with like soldiers for hire, okay? I think there's problems with like accountability and then kind of just the concept of like privatizing war, that kind of thing, okay? So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about, and Kerry's going to expand on that. Okay. So first of all, like onto like accountability, okay? Like it is vitally important that the government like has control over its soldiers, okay? That's just a thing that you need to have in war, okay? And it's fundamentally like problematic when these soldiers are kind of like subject to two different kind of like officers, two different kind of like goals that they have, okay? Like so they have like the government that is hiring them to fight, and then they have like their own people and their own officers, and that's fundamentally problematic, okay? And you need like soldiers with like yes.
So one of the main ways that they use contractors, they use them in like ground EMPs and that combat situations. We assume that this means all combat roles whatsoever.
Yes. Okay. I think that was fairly clear. Okay, so so like you need like soldiers to be like unconflicted, like on a battlefield, okay, and to follow the aim of like that government like completely, okay, because like when you have things like kind of when you have like miscommunication, when you have people not following orders exactly, that's when mistakes get made. That's when you have like a greater like chance of like doing something bad. That's when like the majority of like war crimes happen, when like you don't exactly follow your orders. You have like another belief system like guiding you where you want to go. Okay, so that means that these so that's what happens with this. Okay, and like a conflict of interest like that like can lead to like escalating a conflict quite severely. Okay, if you make the wrong decision. The problem that we have here is that these soldiers like are not held accountable like for their actions and for what they do during war, at least not held accountable to the same degree that like the government soldiers would be. Okay, why? Because first of all, they have like they're more alien like to that government. They're not like citizens of that country. Okay, they don't like care as much. Okay, they're not like subject to, they're subject to two authorities, and they're not subject to things like grand juries to like the same extent that like government soldiers would be. Okay, so there aren't those things in place to prevent them from doing like bad things, and also like because they're quite estranged from the rule of the government and from the rule of general kind of like officers in the conflict. So that's the big problem. Okay. And like now to move on to like kind of like wars for profit and like the fundamentally like bad thing about it. Okay, first of all, these people are like making money off of these wars. Okay, they're being paid to do this, and oftentimes they can be like paid more than government soldiers or like receive more benefits, and they essentially they're getting good things out of fighting these wars, which is not something that you want for wars. That leads to like more wars. It leads to people like not wanting that conflict to end because like that is their source of income. Okay, so that's a big problem when you have people like fighting for profit. Like also like they want to maximize like what they can earn. Okay, and like this leads to like if you look at say like the privatization of like prison and stuff like that, it leads to just like cost cutting measures wherever you can go. Okay, so like things like they do whatever they can to like maximize what the profit they're going to get out. That leads to like things like more mistreatment of locals, more like they stop seeing like these people like as people and more like like items of profit, or like literally like dollar bills that they can like gain money from like fighting the good fight. Okay, I'll take opening now if you have that POI.
Yes, so basically you're against private contractors also like selling missiles because they also make money out of war and out of killing.
Yeah, I don't think they should be selling missiles. Like, I mean, I don't think missiles are a good thing. I don't think I have to stand behind things like nuclear warfare or anything like that. Like less big weapons good for the world. That's pretty okay. So yeah. Also, when you like can hire anyone, okay, this is kind of due to like the wars for profit and kind of the empathy that you get like from this. Okay, so like when like the government can like hire anyone it wants to like fight its fight, when it can like send out like soldier after soldier after soldier, like they become like more estranged from the actual kind of idea of like war and what's happening. Okay, and like you just get more wars engaged with because you have a greater like like amount of like fodder that you can keep sending at it. And also, like, we don't have the thing that often stops like governments from sending people out, which is like, you know, people being like, but I don't want to send my son out to war, I don't want things like conscription. Okay, so like you have like them being able to like send out lots of people with less public backlash, okay? So they have more people that they can use to like engage in wars. And then because there's less public backlash, there's less kind of like media engagement with that. And so like you get like all of like the good things that you want from war by engaging in a conflict, but none of the bad things governments want, like, you know, like huge unpopularity that will lead to them not getting elected again. So this leads to them engaging in like more wars. And as far as we believe that there's such a thing as like a good war, we think this leads you to like engaging in a lot more like bad wars, because there's less of those kind of like safety measures in place, there's less of those like hurdles that the government has to go over when engaging in a war. Okay, so like because these people are like estranged from the people in a country, like there's less of like there's less empathy there. People care less about what the government is doing, so less investigation into what that government is doing. Okay, so like essentially it just leads to them engaging in more wars, okay, which we think is a bad thing, like pretty much all around, okay, and the symptom of what you have like wars for profit, we have people who think they're going to benefit from it, okay. So like in terms of like we think this is a bad thing, because you have more like wars engaged in, you have less accountability for those soldiers, you have those soldiers thinking that, or like thinking more about the money that they're going to make and not about like the people of that region, okay. So like as I said, like as far as we believe that the government like can engage in a good war, we think this is a way to encourage them to engage in more like bad wars with more things like war crimes, with less hurdles in place for them to stop them from doing that. So we think that is something inherently wrong, and you shouldn't allow people to like fight for money, because that will just lead to more people fighting, which is just like a bad thing. So for all of those reasons, and for the more that Kerry is going to bring you, we really beg you to propose.
Leader of the opposition.
One, two, three, go. Chairperson, it is very nice to talk about a world without wars, but we live in a world which we do have. That means that we have wars, and that means that we want to win those wars as a country. Now, we think that that's incredible. Now, we think that there is some misconception as to like what exactly do those private contractors who are in combat situations do. I'm going to address that extensively. Why are they necessary? Why are their expertise necessary? That would be my main point of speech. I'm also going to talk about, in direct clash with what we heard before, about accountability. Why do we have accountability on those contractors? But before that, a few points of rebuttal don't really fit. So basically, what we get from first prop is that fighting for profit is wrong, and we should forbid it irregardless of the consequences, irregardless of any utilitarian calculus. We think that is false, right? Because like we say, like just like when you buy, I don't know, like missiles or guns or anything from a private company, which is what you do, right? Like the army doesn't have the technical skills to manufacture all the weapons that they use, right? Right off the bat, there are people making money out of the war. Moreover, right, like even if they want to nationalize all the entire weapons manufacturing, moreover, even if in that case, the soldiers who fight the war are still being paid to, right? Like we don't make enough of a distinction between between soldiers who are fighting for their country and being paid for, and contractors who are fighting for that country and being paid for, right? Like we don't see that much of a moral distinction there. And they don't abolish wars, obviously. So we need to focus on what helps us make wars A, more effective, and B, like less horrifying. We think that on both counts we win. So first of all, I'm going to talk about accountability, right? Like, so basically, they say that because it's an alien body, we don't have that much control over it. Chairperson, we think that's inaccurate. Three main reasons why. A, those contractors are subservient to martial law. That means if they commit any sort of crime during their engagement, during the period of their engagement, they will be prosecuted under a martial court like any other soldier. That is not different in any way. Secondly, and they will go to jail if they are convicted of war crimes or anything like that. Secondly, Chairperson, when they're not entirely disconnected from the chain of command. How does that work? They're usually assigned as part of a normal combat unit, right? Like the army doesn't pay that everyone, an entire infantry brigade of private contractors. They can't really afford it. They use them for special, as specialists inside. They usually use them as specialists in a way which is part of a grander military operation. By that, usually as very often as translators, very often as trackers, very often as people who have connections to the local communities, people who can interact better, people who understand culture better, people who will be respected more and therefore can procure vital information in those combat areas a lot easier in a way that saves lives. But they are still a part of the chain of command. They still have somewhere down the line a commanding officer who is a part of the army, and usually not that far behind. And thirdly, we think that if anything, they are somewhat less likely to commit atrocities and so on. Why? Because they're usually paid a bit better. Now, what does that mean? Being a soldier is a very eroding sort of job. It's a job in which you are down under a lot of stress, and you have a lot less of free time. Now, contractors are very often given more free time. They're being paid well. They feel they're being compensated more, and that means they're less frustrated. And the less frustrated they are, the more likely they are, because they are because they feel less frustrated, they are less likely to act in a harmful way toward the local populace. Before I go on, I want to hear for a second.
So companies like Blackwater actually only exist because they're actually risking the lives of certain people rather than using them as specialists. They're using them as cannon feather. Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we don't think that that's accurate. If anything, strictly speaking, from a financial perspective, you can't really afford to use people who have extensive training as cannon fodder. Moreover, we have to pay compensation to the families, which are quite high. If anything, I'm pretty sure that the rate of casualties in private contractors, because of those reasons, is pretty lower than that in the usual army. Moreover, they signed up for that, they agreed to that, which allow people to take risks that they deem appropriate in order to make money. The same way I allow someone to be a fire marshal, or police officer, or just a usual soldier. We don't think that that's a choice that people cannot make, Chairperson. Okay, so to my second point, let's talk about why it is truly necessary and why it makes such a far more effective way to wage war. Right? So how do we use these people? I talked about it a bit before. We use people who have a certain set of skills that are very hard to come by in the army, right? People who have certain language expertise, people who have more of a cultural understanding of the local populace, people who actually grew up in that, who actually lived in that community. Now, those are things that are very hard to come by because you would often need someone who is a citizen of that country and not your own, right? There are relatively few Americans who grew up in rural Afghanistan and still have connections and family there, right? So the army doesn't have that many people on their own, right? So you need to recruit members of the local community, right? That's one aspect of that. They need to people who are acquainted with the land and the people and the language and the culture, and that's something that we simply cannot teach because you cannot teach someone or give them access to connection. And because of that, we get valuable information which saves lives both on our side, and also means we need to use disproportionate strikes a lot less, and because of that, we have a much more efficient way to wage war. Because of that, we are very, very proud to oppose.
Prime Minister's deputy.
Okay, so I'm going to be speaking to you today broadly under the same point headlines that Catherine brought you, and I'm just going to be expanding on those points, and most of my rebuttal will be interwoven. But first of all, some of it is so pressing, I'm going to start with it. Okay, so the last thing we got from LO, which I'm actually quite shocked by, was that he thinks it's really important that Afghani Americans fight in the the war in Afghanistan. We tell you that's first of all not mutually exclusive to them being contractors. Hypothetically, if that was a good thing, which it's not. But second of all, that is a horrible thing to force Afghani Americans to be complicit in a horrible war that was very unjust and killed thousands of their people. We tell you even if this was exclusive, which it's not, it's horrible to force these people to be complicit in thousands of their own people. Second, two other pieces of rebuttal before I get in. So in his point about accountability, he says oh, these people are still subject to martial law. We tell you that it's already so problematic when you get war crimes that have to be taken to the ICC. It's almost currently impossible to get any convictions in the ICC because of the burden of the chain of command. We tell you it's much easier for governments to now pawn off these atrocious deeds. I'm going to be bringing you some examples of these later on. It's now much easier for them to pawn them off on private contractors that they can just say went rogue, as opposed to people that are actually clearly intrinsically part of their own army and are subject to their own chain of command. You blur these lines and you get huge problems when you do that. Second of all, when he says how they're used as specialists. Okay, so first of all, he says Catherine mischaracterizes. Okay, she doesn't first of all, but he also says that oh, that they're only used as specialists. We tell you that's not true. See the fact that many of them are used as prison guards, which doesn't have to be a highly trained or skilled job, and rather loads of problems arise from that. Number two, he says they're often used as translators. Okay, so we tell you that this bit actually is true in his speech, but the problem with that is that these translators are treated terribly by these military contractors. They tell them that they'll give them visas to America that they never get, and then they're treated horribly by their own local people because they are seen as being complicit in a war that is attacking them and has had drastic, horrific effects on their own countries. We tell you it's horrible to ask these people to first of all be complicit in this war, and then to ask them to be actively engaging in this war and to be contributing to a war effort against your own people, which will only harm you in the end. Okay, so just on the POI Catherine got as well, when he was oh, do you not, you can't, there is privatization of missiles, do you want to get rid of that, because she's also not banning wars. There's a very big difference between buying a missile and putting someone on the ground in charge of Iraqi prisoners. We tell you it's very different. Why is it different? Because we tell you that those people just fundamentally aren't on the ground. We tell you if you need to buy arms, first of all, as Catherine proves to you, that you get less buying of those arms because you have less bad wars that wage on for years and years that become a drain on your own economy. Okay, so on to my main point now, and extending what Catherine said on why it is so bad to privatize war. Okay, so LO says that oh, Catherine doesn't actually she doesn't provide distinction between the state and privatization of armies. I think she did, but they were listening, so I'll say it again. Okay, so we tell you that there's fundamentally conflicting interests between what the government wants out of a war and what a private company wants out of war. We tell you that presumably a government doesn't want to end up spending 10 years in a war that they're going to lose, that has drastic effects on your own economy and your own public perception of your party within that economy. We tell you that's so problematic. Whereas the difference between that and a private group is the private groups would love for this war to go on 15 years. They're loving their new mansions that they're making out of the Afghanistan war and what they'll probably make of Syria as well. We tell you this is horrible. So their interest versus the government, the government wants to spend as little money as possible, whereas these companies want to earn as physically much as possible. So this provides huge incentives for them to manipulate the system in order for them to make as much profit as possible. Okay, so we tell you that what happens here is that like these people will aim to make profit at any cost. And how do they do this? They cut costs on what they're being paid to do. So like as I've already said, a huge amount of the cost of the money that these people are given is towards like prison guards. So take the example of Abu Ghraib, whereby they were given like money to run this prison at like drastic consequences. So we tell you that what happens here is that like when you are being told to cut as many corners as possible and that the dollar is your line that you have to draw, you have to like spend as little as possible on running this prison. Do you logically think that you respect a prisoner, that you are trying to like get them to live off of less than $1 a day? Do you think that you see them as human beings? Like, are you more likely to treat someone like that you see as like less than human? Well, we tell you no, which is what these private military contractors encourage. They tell you that like these people are just animals, like they're about to go to slaughter, that can be queued up. We say that like there's particular evidence of this. Sorry, I'll take your POI now so I run out of time.
So given that soldiers also earn a wage, how do any of the financial incentives that you just talked about not also apply to soldiers?
Okay, because we tell you there's a fundamental distinction, as I've already brought you, between government interest and private interest in running a war. Like, the government presumably, like, the difference there is that, like, while soldiers earn a wage, they're much more likely to be trained up. Like, OO tells us that, like, oh, like, they're trained up, that's why we need them. Why would the government train anyone if they can just outsource it? It's much better to have them in the government or like in your own army where you can control them, where you have the clear chain of command, which I've already brought you, so I hope that answers your question. Okay, so we've told you already, just back to my main point, on how this like lack of respect leads to like situations like Abu Ghraib, where you have like military contractors like piling up live like naked bodies. Like we tell you that what also happens is that if you are getting paid per like prisoner that you can keep, it tells you like are much more likely to just like go out, round up the local village men and just keep them in there without like any different end to that term. Like quite often these people haven't even received a trial. Why would you give them a trial if you could just keep them in there forever and keep like getting loads and loads of money from it? So like there's no incentive to release them then. We tell you that's hugely problematic. So like why is this so important? Because we believe that like governments just have fundamentally different aims than private firms in going to war. Catherine's already brought you why such things as just wars do exist. And we've also proved to you why these private entities have fundamentally different aims that harms people. On that, we're so happy to propose.
The Leader of the Opposition's Deputy.
I started. Okay, that was very fast for me. I'm going to try and rebut most of it. I'm going to have 4 points of rebuttal. My main point is going to be, my only point is going to be on the importance of efficiency in times of war. Okay, but first of all, let me move to my rebuttal. Okay, so first of all, about Afghani Americans forced to fight. This is a misunderstanding. He said the exact opposite. He said we're not taking Afghani Americans to fight in their homelands. We are recruiting people in their own countries. First of all, this is a misunderstanding, and the reason that is different is because each country has its own conflict of interest inside the country. So to assume that people inside the country there wouldn't exist people inside the country that want to help a foreign invader is simply patronizing to the complexities of these countries. My second part of the rebuttal is about, quote, the horrific effect of those recruited. She mentioned, sorry, the previous speaker mentioned that they do not receive visas. They do not get the conditions that they need, that they deserve. Well, the cure for that is to give them visas. If she's saying that we are treating them badly, then we should treat them more fairly. This is not the motion we are discussing. And we do agree that we do not treat them well. What we do is make this more transparent and make the government more part of what is taking place in those cases. My third point of rebuttal is about private companies making more money and how they want more. Let me give you a few more examples. First of all, Boeing, Smith & Wesson, all manufacturers of weapons. And bear in mind, this is a different use of this concept, because what I'm saying is they're saying they have an incentive to keep war going for as long as possible, but the big lobbies, the really big lobbies, belong to Boeing, belong to those who make aircrafts for billions of dollars, who make ships for billions. That's okay? Yeah, make ships for billions of dollars. These are, because you're not writing, that's what the reason I'm asking. That's the reason I'm asking. Okay, no problem. Private companies these private companies have much bigger lobbies. They are much more susceptible to. They are much more powerful, and that is why it is completely baffling that they choose it. Also, we need to take into important that the reason that we went to Iraq was not because of Blackwater. It was because of Shell oil and British Petroleum and other elements in society. Not now, sorry. So what we're saying is that the incentive exists, and they are marking Blackwater and these organizations as something special, but it is not something special. It is part of our culture, and this is not what this motion is about. Now, the fourth point rebuttal is about the brainwashing. They hinted towards the idea that it is easier to brainwash someone if they belong to these private organizations. But in truth, countries with a nationalistic reason to go to war are more susceptible to brainwashing their soldiers, as in while soldiers that do this professionally are less susceptible to be brainwashed because they at no point receive any nationalistic reasons to go there. They receive financial reasons, and that is why they are more likely to be
Question?
No, to show judgment. Now, before I move on to my first point, after the rebuttal, I want to frame this in a way. So, what they said had a lot of pacifism in it, which is not bad on its own, as in they did not say why this is so good. They say, let's assume there are good wars, or they said the Afghani war, which was, I can't remember the quote, unjust or unfair or illegitimate. They did not.
Question.
No, they did not expand upon it. What we are saying is, and this came in Abkhaz's speech, wars are sometimes a part of reality. Now, this debate is not about should we abolish wars, should we shut down the army. This is about private organizations. And assuming we do, so this entire debate is framed in the reality that we have to go to war. And if we have to go to war, we need to win this war, and we need to be able to do it while minimizing casualties to our side. Now, they can come and say we want to diminish casualties on both sides, but they did not do it. Well, they said it, but they did not explain it. All I have to do at this point is say that we have an obligation towards citizens of our own towards citizens of our own country, and because they did not give any sort of experience why the Afghan war is unjust, then it has to hold. Now, to my point about the importance of efficiency in times of war. So, as I said, we are framed in a reality where we are at war. Now, you want to achieve your goals in war because the alternative is defeat. Now, we need to, here enters the concept of attrition. Two kinds of attrition, the death toll, and the second one is the financial price. Now, these people, as Avichai already explained, are more professional. They get paid more, they are handpicked with capabilities, you have capabilities, they are handpicked as more professional people, and that is why they are less likely to make mistakes. And another thing about the death toll is how these companies have a huge incentive to preserve life because they cash out the pay insurance when someone dies. So this is not cannon fodder. These are people that are very valuable to the organizations, and their life are very financially incentivized to be protected, much more than in the army, where they can throw away 200,000 people in Vietnam and no one has to pay for it with his job yet.
If the goal of any government is to lower the casualty on their side, so why don't we drop the H-bomb every single time we go to war?
I have no problem with that. Okay, now we need to speak about, no, I'm sorry, it's not true. It's not true. We are not talking about dropping the H-bomb. Of course I'm not going to the other extremity here. Of course I'm not talking about killing every other person in the other side. It was wrong of me to even suggest it. What we are saying here is that when you need to make a judgment call, these private contractors in these locations are more suitable to make the judgment call that preserves our national lives, and we got nothing from the other side, or not enough from the other side to balance it. Now, quickly to my second, to the point about financial price. Now, the army has little incentive about saving money. The taxpayer pays; they don't care. It makes a lot of redundancy. Now, we cannot fight for long periods of war while we are spending so much money. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan cost $11 trillion for the Americans. So their ability to fight a war for longer periods is diminished. Now, please keep in mind, we are not talking about abolishing wars or about their morality. We're talking about a frame where we are at war. If we need to be able to sustain a war for a long period of time with less people dying on our side, this is the best way to do it. And everything else is immoral to our constituents, and therefore you have to oppose it.
Before I recognize the member of the government, speakers are reminded that non-rhetorical questions to be prepared and out of order. The member for the government.
So, I'm sure we can. Oh, all right, yeah. We usually put up a chair in front of us, but since they're filming,
I'm not that shy, so they can. I'm going to make a question on what the opposition has said before coming to 4 points, which is first of all the inherent motivational difference between somebody who is paid for war and somebody who goes to war because of the national army. Secondly, why we depend on these companies and why this is a bad thing. Thirdly, why we would, secondly, why the equitability thing is actually a pretty big concern for us. Secondly, why we depend on these companies. Thirdly, why the value of human life should not be put a price tag on. Yes, so thank you very much. First of all, rebuttal. You said that these companies are actually hand-picking specialist-seeking institutions that seek the best out of the best and then send them to war to create a better way for life. Actually, this is totally absurd because what these companies do is maximize their profit. Thus, they want to send as much people as possible into war and they don't care where they come from. They don't care if they had war crimes committed or just violent crimes because they are cheap. They don't care if they are competent enough because what you want to do them is to hold a gun and to kill as many enemies as they want to, which is totally contradicting the paradigm of war that we have today, because today war is not about winning, as you pointed out. If we want to win a war, we could just drop bombs on them. Today it's not about two sovereign governments fighting. Today it's about helping a government rebuild themselves. It's about helping. It's about creating life and making soldiers not only fighters but saviors. So first of all, why does someone become a soldier? You don't become a soldier for money. You become a soldier because you want to protect. You believe in the system and the values that it embodies, and thus you are willing to fight and to even die for these values. And this is extremely important because the way you behave in the country is the way that country is going to perceive your country as well. So if you go to war for protection of people, if you say, all right, this is extremely dangerous, I want to protect my people, I want to help these people get into democracy, then you will help them. If you're just a mercenary, because it's soldiers versus mercenaries, you can go from any country to these companies, be sent to war and be like, yeah, all right, I don't believe in anything of that, but I want my company to be effective. You also stated that, which is funny, that these soldiers would be better off than they were before. I tell you, if somebody gets hurt or captured, he becomes political capital, because right now a country will have to negotiate for these soldiers caught. What a company can do is like say, yeah, no, there were no MIS, so missing in actions, or KIS, killing in actions. Once captured, these soldiers are they will die because nobody will take care of them any longer, since the countries want to be judged based on their effectiveness, and getting caught is not effective at all. So it's about soldiers versus mercenaries, and this is a fundamental motivational difference. It can also be found in already stated motivational difference from the companies and the countries. Companies will inevitably prolong a war, and hand in hand goes an increasing of war crimes. Not high-scale war crimes, but small-scale ones, because they want to have a conflict enduring as long as possible so they can fight and prosper from it. What they will do is maybe not committing a genocide or making an extremely powerful and prosecutable war crime, but they will maybe shoot some civilians, make the local population really angry against them, just because they say, all right, once they hate us, we can say, yes, we got attacked so often, we have to stay here and fight and fight and fight. And this is going to be totally on the expense of the local population. Don't you agree?
No, sorry. In those very extreme cases, again, those people are prosecuted under martial law. It's not different from any other social.
Oh yeah,
He is also motivated to kill civilians under your logic in order to preserve his own life.
Yeah, but in private prison in the US, civilians have been abused for years. They had presentations for their shareholders stating, all right, yeah, we have not that many personnel, but we have a high return rate because we don't give them what they need, we don't integrate them no more, and this has been going on for years. And how do we think that a company that is so far away, Afghanistan is far away, can't be held accountable for what they did. Nobody knows. They can restrict the access to news and messages from these countries. They couldn't do in our own country, and they will by far more easier do this in the other countries as well. So it's extremely bad, and it will lead to a prolonging of conflicts inevitably. Next point. We would depend on these companies. Totally. And these companies can do business with whomever they want, because realistically you can never establish a framework that keeps these companies from it. Why that? They were going to be multinational. It is inherently extremely important for these companies to be multinational, because they just get workforce cheaper from other countries. Let me talk about Switzerland. They export the cheapest nationals in the world. Actually, they exported 10,000 last year. And they go to US companies, they go to French companies. This is, in our end, dangerous for one big reason. Soldiers are one side of the executive of our federal power. Once we take away this one arm, we can easily take away the other one, which is the police, and this will impose even more risks to us. However, if we put these companies in charge of our wars, we will be like giving someone a gun and trust them not to point them on our head. We give them, I pay you €5 to fight my conflicts for me, and if somebody will pay them more, who knows what they do. You can never see which dangers they will have, and they will have dangers because their interests, their values that they should fight for are not persistent in these companies, which seek, of course, for profit and for long-term prospering. Next, let me talk to you about the value of human life, because its perception is inevitably going to change. Today, if we have a conflict, two soldiers were killed in Germany last year. We had a huge mess about it because everybody was talking about it. Nobody wanted these soldiers to be dead. The politicians were extremely sharply criticized for that. If we give soldiers in the hand of the companies, we will inevitably lead to a situation in which they can disguise the loss of human life, because they can restrict access to news, and they will do that. And once politicians are no longer judged based on the lives lost, but on the efficiency the wars had, there will be more conflicts, because both politicians and the public will have a misconception of all these wars actually are, because these extremely powerful companies that we established will then restrict the access to the media, restrict the access to finding out what actually happens, because even in federal armies it's difficult today. So we will create more conflicts, because a politician can say, yes, you know what, we killed like 500 tangos last year, and the number of soldiers killed is actually going to decrease.
Yes, the lobbyism point is to be renewed in this debate. Again, it's relevant to all contractors, not just in combat capabilities. You need to be more specific to that.
Yeah, and you know why these companies actually have value? Because they are innovative. They can make better weapons than federal institutions could do, thus protecting our soldiers' lives better. This analogy is totally hinging, because it just hinges on the fact that you say, yeah, somehow they profit from war, then they should be, criticized as well. But this is a totally different case. Right now, you give somebody a gun and put him in charge of a war, and let him even commit a war crime and have a company to cover up for him. So, because the motivational difference between soldiers and mercenaries is so extremely important, we think that soldiers should fight the war. They should be the saviors and not the fighters, because once they function as ambassadors, they account for how our country is perceived in other countries. They will increase war crimes, because these companies will, of course, try to prolong the wars that are already had. And we should never put a price tag on human life, especially not in war, because the misconception of war will lead to more conflicts. Today, wars are about rebuilding, because you want to abandon an extremist group from power and then give back democracy to the people, give back freedom to the people, and because none of them can be achieved with the private military contractor called PMCs in war, we of course are very proud to propose.
The opposition member.
Sorry, 2 seconds. Mr. Speaker, today we're going to extend from closing opposition on 2 very particular points, all to do with money, because money makes the world go round. Right. So we today are going to tell you specifically why we think that the incentives that contractors have are, 1, different to the incentives that the army has, and 2, this is what makes them more efficient, which we think is what's going to lead to less wars. We think this is going to make them better. We're also going to talk about, particularly the kind of nuances surrounding the type of people that are contractors and the types of people that are soldiers, and why actually sometimes these incentives work on the opposition's favour, in that we think that the contractors are less likely to want to commit war crimes for some of the reasons that actually proposition have brought us, right? So we're going to talk to you about that. So first, a little bit of extraneous rebuttal on one of the bits that closing government brought us on the kind of idea that if we have contractors, then we may get to a point, it was a kind of slippery slope argument back, we may get to a point where we're taking away the police, we're taking away the kind of the part of the federal government, and they may point the gun at us, right? First of all, we think that slippery slope arguments aren't very persuasive. We think that privatising one thing isn't going to lead to privatising another thing. We also think that like all international laws prohibit fighting wars with just mercenaries, right? We think that we're never going to get to a point where we're like only having mercenary-led wars or only having private contractors leading wars, right? We don't think that's very persuasive, right? We think that just falls apart. Okay, so let's talk about like the incentives that contractors have and like why we think that on our side of the house, like these are very important as part of the larger military structure in which they exist, right? So the first thing is that like contractors, like on a financial basis, right? For the reasons that they kind of talk about, like as why people pay them, right? They pay them to do a good job, right? They pay them to create a success, right? Which means that if you as a military contractor go in and blow things up, and kill and commit lots and lots of war crimes, right? That is not very good when you go back to the government and go like, oh, by the way, do you mind extending our contract? We'd like to like earn more money off you. Because they say, no, we'll go to a different contract who isn't going to like cause no thank you lots and lots of problems for us on like an international scale because you killed lots of people, right? We think that is just a kind of characterization of like the world in which like military contractors work, right? The main source and use of military contractors, right? Which was why my POI to opening government was important, right? And kind of like the idea of like stopping all contracts, right? Is that the majority of their use, right, tends to be on like protecting like specific VIPs and like kind of external auxiliary military combat roles. No, thank you, right? Like these are important for specific reasons, right? Because what actually happens is like these contractors have an incentive to create a good product for the government they're paying for, right? I'm going to talk to you in a little bit about like why soldiers don't have that, right? They are, if we are to like, if we take their kind of characterization of contractors, right, if they are purely monetarily incentivized, right, that means that the government can decide how much to pay them and whether they do not want to pay them, right? Which means that if you are a person who is solely incentivized by money, it is easier to incentivize you not to kill the wrong people or to commit war crimes, right? Because you will no longer get paid, right? So kind of like closing government's kind of characterization of soldiers is you're the type of person who like, grows up, wants to protect your country, lots of nationalism, right? That's a problem, right? Because when you start to hate the people that you are fighting against, then you are more likely to commit war crimes, right? Your example about Abu Ghraib, right, was interesting because whilst there were some contractors who were involved in that, the majority of the people who were involved in that were actually military people, right? These were soldiers who, through their hatred, right, and bear in mind that the army is incentivized in order to get people to be riled up to want to fight, is incentivized to make you think of the other people as other, to make you think of the people that you're fighting against as non-humans, right? Because that's how you get people to shoot people in the head. No thank you, right? So what we think about we get on our side of the house, right, and at least the kind of, and opening opposition did a little bit, but we're going to extend it to the point where it's a fleshier argument, is that what you actually get is these contractors who are being paid to do a job, right? Which means that you're less likely to want to like kill and maim and do things because you kind of like have less of a reason to kind of believe that this is like a good, just war and you're protecting your family at home, right? You're doing this from your bottom line, right? And that means that if the person in charge of you says, we want to do this, this is our end goal, that's the end goal, right? It's not to then go in there and make a mess of things as well, right? We think that doesn't sound good.
Okay, so do you honestly think that you see people as less of like as more like actual people when you're actually just treating them as like profit-making like individuals?
Well, we think that, given that these are the people that are willing to shoot you on the head, right, we think that like on both sides of the house, what you get on your side is you get soldiers who aren't doing it for money, but are doing it for like this kind of nationalism, patriotism thing, where you're made to see things like that. Or you get people who are paying, right? And like on a kind of like balance of comparatives, do I believe that people who can be paid not to do it, won't do it? Or do I feel that people who are like, aren't being paid to do it, but do it anyway, are going to do it, right? Frankly, we think that on our side of the house, we at least get a situation where you aren't having this kind of like nationalized kind of thing going on, right? You at least are doing it for the bottom line, right? That doesn't mean you're going to see people as other. It actually probably means that you're just going to be ambivalent, right? We think that that's better than just actually hating them, right? So this kind of brings us on to like the kind of incentives that these contractors have, right? These incentives are very important, right? Because this is what brings us to debate, right? So on their side of the house, right, they talk about the fact that what these contractors want is to kind of prolong these wars, right? We actually think that that's a mischaracterization for a few reasons, right? So the first thing is that if you are a contractor, right, and you are going into things and people can see that you are trying to prolong wars, right, so i.e. on their side of the house, they thought that they would do that by like making a mess of things, killing some civilians, that kind of thing. Even on a small scale, right, that's messy, right, And one of the big problems of that, and this brings me on to account, and I can basic point a little bit, is that what you actually end up getting is these really big problems where you're going to lose your contract, right? If you're making a mess of things, the government are not going to re-employ you to do these things, right? And bear in mind that in a free market, we're going to have more than one kind of source of these contractors, right? We think that that's a fair mischaracterization, right? We also think that one of the big points that came out of like the government that we think just doesn't stand is this kind of idea of like accountability, right? Bear in mind that, again, with the example of Abu Ghraib, right, the military people, like, you have to deal with the whole structure, right? If you want like compensation or whatever, or like you want to prosecute someone for doing something, like, it's more difficult to tackle the military than it is to tackle these countries, right? And bear in mind that because these people are also civilians and not part of the military, they also then have to go through even small stringent courts, right? But not even military courts, but actually civilian courts, and then they were more likely to get. And they're more likely to get done, right? But also, right, the companies are less likely to protect their contracts, right? Because it is expensive to like deal and protect your kind of like contracts, right? They're more likely to then be held to account, right? Because the military kind of, in order to like create this kind of pally sense of nationalism, have to say, well, look, we're going to, you're going to do, you may do these horrible things, but we'll at least protect you, right? The military are less likely to actually like not chuck you out, but you know what I mean? So they're more likely to protect you than these companies, right? So we actually think we get more accountability on our side of the house for these reasons, right? If companies do care about money, right? They also care about doing things in an efficient way, right? And we actually think that means that you are less likely to commit these atrocities because you can be paid not to, right? So frankly, on our side of the house, we think we can do this. Thank you.
Government whip.
So the interesting idea is that they come up here and tell you Blackwater and Blueberry are just names that are really cuddly and really sweet because they're actually helping people and not shooting people in the head. One of the problems that we have here is under the status quo, Americans are already paying for sending companies in order not to send soldiers and therefore not being accountable for these deaths. Because the reason that these Republicans and also Democrats are actually sending these companies in order to not take accountability for the soldiers and for the lives. Because the difference was already explained by Florian, but they failed to engage with it by stating that the difference between a soldier life and a mercenary is that nobody cares about the mercenary in a country any longer. The soldier is actually there to provide the certain values that society wants to be imposed on these countries, but the mercenary, nobody cares about it, rather maybe the company but not the politicians. And this is the lack of accountability that we brought you today and actually explain why the lack of accountability is a bad thing, because it makes it far more likely that politicians just ignore the fact that there are people dying over there because you just have to pay a little bit of money for it. So then they say, okay, contractors are just paid to do a job. I think opening government already did a fairly good job, and Florian extended on that, why it's inherently bad to just see it as a job if you shoot people. Because we feel that the value of life itself is actually being persuaded differently once you start paying someone for just every single headshot they are taking, because it's different between the soldier who actually goes in there in order to save the country, as we already pointed out, in order to believe that he can actually change the lives in these countries and build, for example, bridges and all of that, which is coming after the invasion, and someone who is actually only there in order to shoot people in order to prolong the war. The reason why we said that it's far more likely that they are actually committing atrocities, it's because it's very easy to actually create an accident where you just shot someone, where you believe actually that this might have been a threat, and it's so much easier to actually convince people back in the US that this was supposed to be a threat, because we already had these kind of lawsuits in Afghanistan. We already had these kind of lawsuits in Iran and in Iraq, and most of the time the people who were actually the victims of these Blackwater and all of them, they never got right because there was no evidence that could actually support these kind of claims, which makes it impossible to actually claim some sort of accountability for these companies, so it makes it easier for them to do whatever they want. And then lastly, okay, so the idea of specialists and efficiency on the first side of it. We think that efficiency means just you go in and do something without the casualties that they actually said. But Governments are not about that. Governments are actually caring about the issues that they're trying to provoke you. Because most of the times right now when Western liberal democracies are going to war, they're actually going there to impose certain values. Okay, Iraq might be something that George W. Bush wanted to impose certain values. However, we think that these kind of wars like Iraq are far more likely to actually enhance under the new status quo, which is making it easier to hire a company who just swoops in and takes the casualties, because the casualties will not be in any number that a politician has to encounter. Okay, so 3 types of clash. First of all, what does a private company provide for, and why is it inherently bad for general warfare? Secondly, why do we think that mercenaries versus soldiers are different, and why do we believe that the motivational choices behind a soldier are actually the ones that are keeping them in place? And the last one is, what do we think of the lack of accountability? Because we've brought you all of these points. Okay, so first of all, the private companies. And we heard from opening government already why it is inherently bad to actually hire private companies. We feel that they are only incentivized by money, but Florian told you why that is. Because shareholders are actually the ones behind that company. Shareholders are actually the ones who are interested in getting revenues. And the reason why these shareholders, they're not inherently bad, they're just interested in their own personal individual. Meaning they do not really care about the countries where these companies are being sent into. But what they do care is that wars will prolong. What they do care about is that companies can actually make money and profit out of it. And what they tell you is, well, there are a couple of companies, yeah, but most of the companies are already in these kind of wars, meaning that the same point that Florian brought you with the dependency fits into that as well. Because we depend on these companies actually to fight the war that we do not want to fight any longer, we're actually going to cut down our military budget, therefore we cannot fight the war any longer, therefore we depend on these companies, therefore there is not going to be the market that they are talking about, which then prevents them from actually not committing any kind of war crimes, because they are the ones fighting the war for us any longer. And we feel that this is inherently bad because it actually will create the kind of atrocities even further, because they have no interest in actually settling down this war. They have actually an interest in fueling the war, because by for example, shooting someone by accident. I take your point.
Without specialists who speak the language and who have connections in those areas, you get less reliable intel that prolongs the war, which is bad for both sides because you're finding it less well.
Okay, I didn't understand why first government didn't respond to that. Because first of all, we're not talking about translators. We're not talking about some sort of drivers. We're talking about Blackwater. We're talking about Blueberry. We're talking about companies who are not who might be hiring one translator in order to keep their soldiers a little bit longer alive. But we're actually talking about soldiers being hired in order to fight the war over there, in order to protect, for example, certain other soldiers that we do not want to feel accountable for. Okay, so next thing, why do we think that values are important? Why do we think that soldiers have to be motivated by it, and why do we don't see this on this side of the house? Well, mercenaries are actually incentivized by money. They claim this is a good thing because then they won't commit atrocities, because somehow they would not get the contract any longer. On our side of the house, you get the motivation of a soldier seeing himself as a savior. If you ask a lot of soldiers why they went to Iraq or why they went to Afghanistan, the first reason that they provide to you was not oil. The first reason that they provided to you was not money. It was the belief that they could actually change something in the country. It was the belief that they could actually help someone in the country. And the difference between that is inherent, because when you go into a country in order to make money, then you want to stay in the country as long as you can. When you go into a country in order to help people, then you actually want to stop the war and actually build something in order to help the country itself. Meaning that the difference between those two things is the moral side of the argument, which wins us this debate, because we believe we will have less wars, and even if we would have wars, we would have some sort of just wars that we would have seen, for example, in Kosovo, because this was something that we actually wanted to help, and this was something where governments wanted to step in. Okay, so lastly, the lack of accountability. Government mentioned this, opening government, but we actually brought it to you. Because what does it mean if you lose a soldier, and where's the difference to a mercenary? A mercenary is just a number in the books of a company. It sounds harsh and it sounds terrible, but it is exactly the way, and it is exactly the reason why Americans are actually paying for a lot of Blackwater soldiers, because they do not have to be accountable for it any longer. Just like Florian said, when they brought those 2 soldiers home who fought for their country, who fought for their values, society in itself was in outcry. The difference between the mercenary and the soldier itself who came home is that the society is now putting pressure on the politicians to, for example, end wars, or not go into wars at all. But if you take these numbers, which are just disappearing in the books of some sort of company, the difference is that the public actually doesn't feel it. First of all, not all mercenaries are actually American soldiers or citizens or German citizens or anything like that, so it makes it far more easy to send them somewhere where it's really dangerous, because you do not have to account for their deaths. Second of all, it makes it far more likely that you create some sort of war against someone if you have have any kind of business interest, because you do not have to account for the deaths any longer. And it makes us thirdly really dependent on them, because we do not have to have a large military any longer, because they are doing it for us. And politicians love if they can cut costs, because they can tell that to the citizens, and we feel this is inherently bad. I beg you to propose.
Opposition whip.
Right, so I've got two main points of clash that I'm going to be talking about today. The first one is the idea of money as a bad or good incentive, and the second one is the idea of will this sort of motion lead to more or less war. But first, I've got a couple of bits of rebuttal that don't really fit into anything else that I'm going to say. First, I think in closing opposition, we completely object to the picture that has been painted today of military contractors and how they work. Okay, and the government has done this clearly to try and kind of paint this dark picture of them to try and persuade you that like it would be a really good thing if we got rid of them. Okay, what we think is this idea of like constant abuses, of using people's cannon fodder, prolonged conflicts, etc., etc., etc. Like, firstly, we can't see any meaningful distinction between like the abuses they brought up on their side that military contractors do and like the things that the regular military does, and so therefore like most of these arguments are arguments for like not having soldiers and not having wars. Okay, like Abu Ghraib was committed by like the US military. Okay, not purely by military contractors. Like, you know, genocides are committed by national armies. Like, we don't think that these are harms exclusive to private military contractors. We don't think they've really persuaded like why in particular private military contractors are more likely to commit any of these things. And actually, as I'm going to go on to tell you, they're less likely to than regular soldiers. And this second idea was raised kind of right at the end of the whip speech on the other side, which was this idea that somehow like they kind of said that like the American government are going in to like and the soldiers going in to help the people of the other country. And like we would just ask the question in closing off, like, who is the American government or the French government? Like, who are they more likely to want to help, and who are they responsible to? And we think the answer to that is like clearly their own people. Like, the Americans didn't go into Iraq out of pure like selflessness. Okay, like they clearly had a self-interested reason to go in there, and that's not something that's going to be like propagated down to their soldiers. Like, there's a reason they went into Iraq like after 9/11. Okay, we don't think that they did it just to help the Iraqi people. Otherwise, they could have done it any time when Saddam Hussein was in power. Like, they do it out of sort of selfish reasons, which are then propagated to these soldiers. And this goes on to my sort of first main point of clash. Okay, so like the closing government tried to paint this idea that money is necessarily a bad incentive. Okay, we don't think they ever proved this or explained necessarily why, except that money will make you want to kill people. But like as Catherine showed you, like there's no incentive to actually kill people. So we'll go into that in a minute. And they kind of said that like what soldiers actually do at the moment is they go and fight because they love international justice and they really want to help poor Afghan people like have a better life. They want to like improve the situation in Iraq. Like we think that like the rhetoric of America preceding the Iraq War means that most of the soldiers who would have gone to Iraq would have done it at best to protect you know, their home that they felt was under threat, and at worst because they wanted to kill people who they thought were like threatening American lives and sending bombs over to kill Americans. Okay, like for example, American Sniper, which is a film that incidentally was hugely popular in the States. Like that was based on the life of a guy whose own memoirs show he saw these people as no more than targets. He saw them as animals to be shot down. Okay, we're talking about like Iraqi children. Like we think that the kind of dehumanization that you talk about happens much more when your incentive is that you don't like these people because they threaten your country, rather than because you've been paid to do it. Okay. We also think like this idea that like, because clearly soldiers don't have a very like large monetary incentive. Okay, like they're paid famously little. Like, so they are doing it because they want to do it. Okay. We think that actually money is a very good incentive when it comes to war. Okay, which might seem perverse because I think we're used to thinking money is always being a bad thing and always incentivizing in the wrong ways. But like, as I've already said, like fanaticism is a really bad reason to fight war. Okay, we think that necessarily leads to more abuses and like a dehumanization of the people that you're fighting. Okay, but secondly, more importantly, if you're incentivized by money, as Catherine showed you, you are incentivized to do a good job. Okay, so like you can't go in and screw up and kill loads of people because the American government won't hire you again. Okay, they'll hire someone else. They'll hire a rival. Like there are loads of these companies. It's a booming industry. So like you are incentivized to do the best job possible in the most efficient way. Okay? So that means that you're more incentivized to invest in like good technology. And you're more incentivized to invest in good people because if you don't have good people, you can't do a good job. Although you won't be hired again. Like obviously they're looking at their bottom line, but actually the best way to protect their bottom line isn't to be embroiled in like international scandal after international scandal, or to lose loads of people. Okay, the best way to protect their bottom line is to do a better job. Although they're going to like get more contracts. So these people are going to have a long-term business model, which is not going to include screwing up so badly we're never employed again. Go for it.
Why do you think that these companies will actually be judged on their job and not on the things that they report to the governments? Because we see very clear that this happened in prisons right in our front doors.
So you're saying that they're going to report different things to the government?
Yes,
than actually happened. Like, we don't think governments are that stupid. Like, the point is private contractors have to exist in a world where, like, the military are also in that country. Like, they can't fight on the front line. That is illegal. So the military can be there as well. There'll be military oversight. They work in auxiliary roles. There's, like, we don't think that they can just walk into the American government and be like, it was actually fine, we killed no one. Like, we don't think that's the thing that can happen. So, like, yeah. So, like, if they're paid to fight, they'll then be paid to stop, which is a really good thing. Unlike fanatics who might just fight on because they really want to. You know, like, see all the people who've gone over to fight ISIS, but believe it or not, the people who've gone to fight for ISIS. But, like, if you're just doing it for money, then you can be paid to stop. We think that that's actually a really good thing, which will, rather than prolonged conflict, will actually sort of make it shorter. And this goes on to my second point, which is that, will there actually be more war, okay? And the picture painted on sort of uniformly across the government side is that this will produce more war, because if these people, like, can fight wars for the governments, then governments will necessarily pay them to fight more wars. Like, firstly, the government doesn't have an endless supply of money, and secondly, they seem to be relying on the idea that the government has the political capital to send mercenaries, but doesn't have the political capital to send soldiers. But as we already showed you, like, they have to fight alongside soldiers, so like that point completely falls. Like, if private contractors are there, the military are also there, so like this kind of, the government doesn't have any more political capital to like do more wars, and they don't have the money to sort of do it. And as I've already said, the contractors aren't going to prolong the wars, because then they won't be paid, or they won't get the contract in the future. Like, there's no incentive for anyone to prolong wars on our side of the house. And then that kind of leads into the side of accountability. So what we think is that, like, these fighters are actually more accountable than regular soldiers. Regular soldiers are protected by the army and by the government, who are an arm of that government, okay? Like, this is why there have been so few prosecutions of soldiers, okay? Because it is very difficult to prosecute these people, because of who they're protected by, because of what the government and the army are invested in kind of protecting them. But actually, these contractors are much more accountable, okay? Because, like, in fact, they're not protected by the government, so the government's not, going to protect them. And actually, the government has an incentive not to protect them, because the government already looks really bad when soldiers do bad things. So, like, it's even worse when, like, contractors might do bad things. The government, therefore, for the PR battle, has an incentive to prosecute these people, okay? It's really good if the government can stand up and be like, oh my god, these people did awful things, even though they're Americans, we're prosecuting them for doing these awful things. That's a huge PR win for the government that's maybe facing accusations that, like, it doesn't do enough to protect Iraqi lives, for example. We think that they're more likely to sort of do this to private contractors than they are to soldiers who are part of them, who have, like, all the PR around what soldiers are and what they do for the country and what they stand for. Like, it's much easier to hold private contractors accountable, and so for all of these reasons, we beg you to oppose.